If you are into 3D printing, one of the best things about it is how good it is for organization. With systems like Gridfinity, Opengrid, Multiboard, Honeycomb storage wall and others, you can create a place for everything. Your tools get proper holders, your parts stop sliding around, and your workspace just starts to make sense. And honestly, that's one of the things I enjoy the most about my 3D printer. Not just making random objects, but solving real problems around me. Making custom storage, making my stuff easier to use, making my workspace better. Now, when it comes to horizontal storage, I think Gridfinity is basically the king. It's not the first system to use this kind of logic.
Haha! Let's shoot the elephant in the room. Alexander Chappell already made a modular storage system, and he already made a number of videos about it, and those videos are better than this one. Alex's design did in fact inspire the Gridfinity, no shit, Sherlock, and I know how salty you people get about the so-called practice of stealing.
I didn't really invent anything spectacular or new. This is an organizer case by a company called Racco. They've been around since the 50s and have made these types of cases since the early 90s. And surprise, surprise, these are individual bins with some sort of geometry in the bottom that helps interlock these boxes.
But Gridfinity did something really important. It became open source. And because of that, it now has a massive community. There are models for almost everything, generators for custom bins, and endless options for organizing drawers, desks and shelves and workbenches. So for horizontal spaces, Gridfinity is very hard to beat. But for vertical storage, things get more complicated. There isn't one uncontested winner. You have got Multiboard, which has a huge ecosystem and lots of parts, but it's not really open source. You have got Opengrid, which is open source but still has a smaller parts library online. You have got Honeycomb storage wall, which also has a lot of options. And then there are other wall storage systems too. So, unlike Gridfinity, vertical storage is a much more competitive space. There are several good options, and choosing the right one is a bit more complicated. But no matter which of those systems you use, there's one big problem they all share. Printing the boards themselves is a pain. And I mean a real pain in. Let's say you want to cover a square meter of wall. If you have a small printer like I do, I have a Creality K3 V3, with a 220 by 220 build volume, you need to print a lot of panels, like 25 panels per square meter. And each one takes about 4 hours to print if we are talking multiboard. So that's roughly 100 hours of printing non-stop. That's more than 4 days of non-stop printing. And that's just to create the wall surface. You still need to assemble the panels, mount them together, and then attach everything to the wall. That takes a lot of filament, a lot of printer time, and honestly, it's just not fun. So I started thinking, what if I could skip that part entirely? What I wanted was not just some random board I could mount to the wall. I wanted something that would still work with the accessories I already use. And because I use both Opengrid and Multiboard, I didn't want to start over with a completely different system. Now, to be fair, saying I wanted full compatibility with both is a bit of a stretch. What I actually wanted was compatibility with Multi-Connect. This mounting interface that looks like a dovetail-like pin or screw that slides into the back of the accessories. That interface was designed by David, the creator of Opengrid. And it's actually available not just for Opengrid, but also for Multiboard and even Honeycomb storage wall. There are even versions to screw directly into a wall or to work with IKEA SCADIs. So my requirements became pretty simple. It had to be cheap, it had to be easy to mount to the wall, and it had to be compatible, or at least mostly compatible, with the accessories mounting system I already use. Now, if you live somewhere with IKEA, you might already be thinking, why not just use SCADIs? And yeah, SCADIs is an obvious option. But first of all, I live in Brazil and we don't have IKEA here. And second of all, it is not really that cheap. And even beyond that, I wasn't convinced that it was the best solution for what I wanted. With the pegboard style system like SCADIs, you just have a small opening. Your bracket is usually supported by a relatively small amount of material around the hole. That's not a problem if you're using metal pegs. It works, of course, but it wasn't sure I liked how much load would be hanging from just those little sections if I 3D printed it. And I usually print everything in PLA. So instead I went with something much simpler. A wire grid panel. This thing is really cheap. Mine is about 60 centimeters by 1 meter and it cost me around 38 reais. About $7. That is way cheaper than printing a full wall of storage panels. So idea was to mount this wire grid slightly offset from the wall, in my case just using a 1.5 centimeter wood strip, and then designing a printed rail on the bracket that hooks into the wireframe and accepts the mounting interface I already use on my accessories. My first design had just a single hook at the top, and it worked, but it was kind of wobbly. It did swing freely, which didn't feel that great. So in the second iteration, I added a second hook at the bottom. That made it sit much better, much more stable, much less movement. But I realized it could still be knocked off too easily. So in the third iteration, I added little ridges to the claw itself. So it kind of snaps into place on the wire grid. So this way it's easy enough to be removed intentionally, but it's much harder to knock off loose by accident. And that for me was the sweet spot. These adapters slide into the backs of the accessories I already own, which means I can keep using the mounting ecosystem I already invested in, without having to print huge wall panels. Now there are a couple of downsides. First, if the accessory isn't tall enough, the mounting bracket can stick out from the bottom a little bit, or a lot. For me that's not a huge issue, because I'm planning to use this in a workshop or work environment, not in my living room. So I care much less about aesthetics than I care about function. Second, the wire grids are not precision engineered parts. They are not exactly 50 by 50 millimeters, they are more like 50-ish by 50-ish. Close enough, kind of square, but definitely not exact. Again, for my use case, that's fine. This is not a premium display, this is a practical, cheap, modular storage solution. And that's why I like it. For places where I don't need the polished look of Opengrid or Multiboard, this lets me save huge amounts of time, huge amounts of filament, and a lot of money. And I still get to use many of the accessories and mounting ideas from other systems. So for me this feels like a good compromise. It's cheap, easy to mount, fast to scale, and still compatible with multi-connect style accessories I already use and which is normally the mounting systems I use when I design something. If you ever wanted the flexibility of systems like Opengrid or Multiboard, but without the misery of printing an entire wall of panels, this might be a real good alternative. Or something like it if you have some kind of board where you live that is cheap and kind of looks like this. And honestly, I think solutions like this are one of the coolest things about 3D printing. Not just copying a model from the internet, but adapting ideas, solving constraints, and making something that works exactly for your situation. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you like and subscribe. That way I know you want more of this. Thanks for watching.